And now it's time to take a quick look at what's grabbing headlines around the world. And with me now is Florence Villeminion.
Hey, Julia.
Hello, Florence. Let's start with the Chinese press, focusing on that visit by President Xi Jinping to Hong Kong, the 3-day visit to mark the 20th anniversary of the handover to China.
It's definitely front page news in China. Let's start with China Daily, talking about how this anniversary advances Hong Kong's confidence. And you can see a photo of President Xi Jinping there in Hong Kong. In its editorial, they talk about how Xi Jinping pledged full support from the motherland, a pledge that will help build a better Hong Kong. In its editorial, China Daily says, what an anniversary gift. What anniversary gift could be more precious than these promises coming from Xi Jinping? It's now Hong Kong's turn to deliver on the goodwill and faith that the central government is showing it.
And now, according to other Chinese papers, the 20-year anniversary proves the success of the one country, two systems policy.
That policy, that one country, two systems policy, certainly is in the spotlight today. You can read about that on the front page of Global Times, so another Chinese paper once again showing Xi Jinping vowing support for Hong Kong. But let's take a look at the editorial of Global Times today that says, you know, in the West, public opinion won't stop finding fault with this system, with this one country, two systems policy. But you can see it says this policy is fit for purpose. And you can see, according to this editorial, it's been operating smoothly for 20 years, depicting it as kind of a watering can there, watering this tree, I guess shows the one country, two system policy. It's an interesting cartoon there. This editorial says all the problems in Hong Kong are under control, and this is what history will record.
Yes, but then recent history has seen quite a lot of political unrest in Hong Kong. How are the Hong Kong papers covering this event?
Well, it's really interesting to look at Hong Kong papers because if you've been reading them for a couple of years, in the past, South China Morning Post, for instance, was quite critical of Beijing. I was quite surprised to see this editorial, which is very much in favor and supportive of Xi Jinping's visit. You can see it says this visit will help cement our ties to the nation. They point out that this policy, the one country, two systems formula, it's worked so well for Hong Kong. South China Morning Post says actually the prevailing tensions that we're experiencing in Hong Kong are hindering the development of a healthy relationship between the city and central authorities. So quite glowing words for Beijing and actually criticism for the West for being critical of this policy. Let's take a look at the cartoon. This is Harry's View, their political cartoonist, which is actually critical of Great Britain, of course, which used to rule over Hong Kong. You can see the Queen here saying, oh, come on. It's not like we were a big advocate of independence either. So pointing out that there's perhaps a little hypocrisy coming from the West here.
So not much criticism coming from China and Hong Kong, but papers outside much more critical.
Yes, let's look at the editorial of the Wall Street Journal today that's focusing on Hong Kong and what's going to come next, what's going to come in the next decade. They point out that, you know, the 20 years after the handover, China has reneged on its promises of democracy and autonomy, and this has understandably upset people, particularly young people who have taken to the streets. So they're talking about an anxious anniversary here. Hong Kong's special status seems to be slipping away. Beijing is cracking down on political dissent. So according to the Wall Street Journal, the third decade of Chinese rule looks like it's going to be even more turbulent.
All right, well, let's now move on to some news coming out of Great Britain, where the government has agreed to allow Northern Irish women to access free abortions in England.
It's a major U-turn that was unexpected. It's on the front page of several papers, The Guardian, for instance, that comes back on just how it happened. Essentially, Prime Minister Theresa May was forced to agree to demands from a backbench Labour MP for a change in abortion laws to essentially head off a historic defeat in the House of Commons. That's kind of the context. But it's a huge shift in policy. And in fact, The Guardian takes a closer look at abortion laws and rates across Europe. It's very interesting. They have a map showing exactly what the rates are, what's going on in Europe. You can see that black spot there. It's, of course, the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, where abortion is illegal. According to The Guardian, Northern Ireland has some of the most restrictive abortion laws in Europe. It's almost impossible for a woman to have an abortion legally there. And so women from Northern Ireland currently were charged about £900 to have an abortion in the UK, and now, well, in the rest of the UK, and now that is going to be free.
And while politicians and campaigners, though, have hailed what they call an end to injustice, but some papers are actually critical of what the government's intentions are.
Indeed, let's take a look at an article in The Independent that says, you know what, Theresa May doesn't care about women's rights in Northern Ireland. She's only interested in saving her own skin. So they're looking at the political context that led to this U-turn. That being said, the article says, today is a victory. This new policy will make a tangible and significant difference to the lives of thousands of women, and that should be celebrated.
And finally, US President Donald Trump is drawing criticism for lashing out at journalists on Twitter.
Yep, this is a tweet that has drawn a lot of criticism. He essentially lashed out against the Morning Joe co-anchor Mika Brzezinski. Quite personal, said that he'd seen her with a badly bleeding face from a facelift. And you can see it's drawn a lot of outrage. The Washington Post in its editorial is beyond outrage, saying Trump clearly won't change. Here's what the rest of us can do to essentially safeguard dignity and US values.
Thank you very much for that. Florence Filomeno.